I'm Chef Frank, this is Protocooks, and today we're making a family favorite, Proto Struffoli. Chef Frank, what is Struffoli, or Struffle like we say it in our family? It's probably an Italian-American accent to it. Basically, they're Italian honey balls, and you'll see them in Italian bakeries and pastry shops throughout the holiday season, and it's a tradition in my house to make these every single year. This is my grandmother's recipe, and she is very specific about the way she wanted it. I remember when I was a kid, her saying, no, you have to cut them smaller. Right? In Italian bakeries, you see these, they're about the size of a marble. In my house, they're much smaller, and it's slightly different kind of flavor than what you find in the stores. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. Get ready for Struffoli. This recipe is my grandmother's on my father's side. She was the Italian grandma. She was awesome. Her name was Josephine Proto. Her maiden name was Russo. I'm not sure if this is the Proto recipe or the Russo recipe, but whatever the case is, this is the way my family does it, and this is what you're gonna need. Eggs, we're just gonna use the yolks, oil for frying, anisette, salt, nonpareils or sprinkles, honey, and flour. First thing we want to do is separate the eggs, and for our recipe we just use the yolks. I like to save the whites. You can make meringues out of them or pavlovas. You can use them from an angel food cake or something like that. But I'd like to hear what you do with your egg whites. So this is what we do. Just separate them out. And for this recipe, normally we will do 2 dozen, but I'm only doing a half batch, so we're just doing a dozen. Go back and forth with the eggs. You can separate them like this, or you can crack them into your hand and let the white fall through. All right, last one. All right, that's done. Let's make the dough. I'm gonna take my salt, put it in. I'm gonna put a little bit of anisette in now, but the anisette is mostly there for a little bit of flavor and if the dough is too dry. So I'm just gonna put a little in now and then reserve a little for later. Just in case the dough is a little dry, we'll add a little more, okay? And I like to whisk this up. This isn't exactly the traditional way that this was made. My grandmother didn't use a mixer. My mom doesn't use a mixer. I have a mixer. So I am gonna need this by hand a little, but the mixer's gonna kind of get it started and bring it all together. And I just find it a little bit easier to do it this way. And there's really no specific measurement for the anisette. So just keep it handy in case you need it. I'm gonna take my flour. I'm gonna dump it all in. I'm gonna put it on the mixer. Let the mixer do a little bit of the work. And let it go. I'm using my dough hook. This will bring it together. And once the dough is together, that's when we'll knead it by hand. It's gonna take a few minutes. In the original recipe, it says to knead for 20 minutes. And I can only imagine that your arms would wanna fall off. Let me just see how it feels. So it still feels a little wet. I'm just gonna give it a quick scrape to just get some of the flour off of the bottom, right? It feels like it's gonna come together. Let me I'll just give it another minute of mixing and we'll see if we need a little more anisette. That smell is kind of transportive, you know, it makes me think of when I was a kid. So it's not really coming together. It's fairly dry dough. I'm just gonna add just another splash, little bit of anisette and let it go. I think that's it. I think we're there. The dough has come together. There's still a little bit of flour in the bottom of the bowl, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of the mixer and then we're gonna knead it by hand. I'm just gonna scrape out my bowl and get it onto my table. There's some dry bits in there. I'm gonna get them all out. And then I'm gonna knead this, right? I have a little extra flour if I want to put it in, but I want to try and keep this the way it is. I don't really want to add a lot more flour. So I'm just going to get in here, pick up all of my little bits and scraps. Make sure you have a clean tabletop for this. And I'm going to knead this. And it's going to take a few minutes. Like I said, the recipe said 20 minutes. You want it to be a really smooth dough. If it's really sticking to your hand, you could add just a dusting of flour, but only dust. You don't want to go too crazy. And what you're looking for is that the dough kind of starts to just slightly tear a little, right? And this, the smell of this, the feel of the dough is so reminiscent of being, you know, a kid at my grandmother's house. I love it. But look at that. Smooth, beautiful yellow dough from all those yolks. When I fold and roll, that's how I knead. I take my dough, I kind of fold it over. I'm using my body weight and the heel of my hand to do this. Give it a quarter turn, fold it, push with my body weight. I'm not really using my muscles, I'm using my weight. Quarter turn, fold, and push. And I think that we're looking good here. You can see that we're starting to get that little bit of tearing, and that's where I want to stop, right? I have some plastic wrap. I'm going to put this in plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out. I'm going to just leave it at room temperature for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll cut them. All right, it's time to roll and cut our struffoli. And I have my dough ball. I'm going to leave this in the plastic, right? So I'm going to unroll it, take the piece that I need, and then rewrap it. I don't really want this to get dried out. We used to put a tea towel or a kitchen towel over this when I was younger, but I have the plastic wrap. I do the same thing with pasta dough, right? And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of pinch this and roll it into a snake, right? A nice skinny snake. And this is where this is key, right? My grandmother would kind of she was a very wonderful woman, but she would also stand over you for this process because it needed to be really thin, okay? And I'm probably not gonna make it small enough, right? But you really wanna get a very skinny snake. This is about the thickness of a pencil. So get a pencil out of the drawer and kind of look at that, right? One of my favorite kitchen tools is a dough scraper. This costs maybe under $1, and it's good for scooping things up. Or you can actually even probably cut with these. I'm going to use a knife to cut because I want them to be really small. And when I was a kid, what used to happen was there would be 2 or 3 people rolling and cutting, and there would be someone frying at the same time. I'm just going to kind of roll them all out and then fry them all at one time. So these are fairly small, and that's kind of where we want them, right? Let me get a little handful of these, right? So they are, if you look at them as compared to my finger, they're basically smaller than my fingernail. So that's where you want them to be. And what I'm gonna do is, as I cut, I'm gonna put them on my tray. Notice I'm not using any extra flour, right? I don't want these to be floured up, but I do want them to kind of be separate, okay? I remember as a kid, they'd give you a little paring knife and you'd just sit at the table and we would cut these up. So these are pretty small, and that's how we want them. And that's one of the main differences between my grandmother's recipe and most recipes you see is that, first of all, there's only a few ingredients in these. And second of all, they're cut really small. I'd like to hear how your family does them, but this is super specific to my family. I've never seen them done like this anywhere else. So write in the comments how you do them. It's always nice to keep these family traditions alive, I feel. I want my kids to do this. I want to pass it along. And what's great about it is I can put it on a video for you guys. So all the struffle is cut. I'm going to set up my frying station and fry these off. It is time to fry. My oil is at about 375. And I'm just gonna sprinkle them in, right? If there's any ones that are really attached to each other, I will separate them out. Make sure they're not stuck to each other. Sprinkle them. So we're at about, like I said, about 375. And we're gonna do these in batches, all right? I can already tell you right now they're a little bigger than she would have liked, my grandmother. We want them to cook to the golden brown. We want them to be fairly firm. I have a tray with a towel here to drain them. And that's it. We're going to fry them all. We're going to let them cool. And then we're going to dress them up. What I'm looking for when I fry is I want to see lots of bubbles. Lots of bubbles means they're not going to be greasy. That means the water is boiling out of them, right? I think I'm good here. Tap them, put them on your tray. Tap, 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 put them on the tray. Get all the excess off. That looks pretty good, okay? We'll keep on going until all of them are fried. They're okay. Are they as good as my grandmother's? No. Probably never gonna be as good as my grandmother's. This is the last batch. They're all draining really nice over there. Let them cool slightly. I want them to be a little warm when I put the honey on, just so the honey kind of like coats them really well. I'll tell you, this brings back memories. I was never allowed to fry, by the way. So I take great pride in the fact that I'm frying right now. Okay, I think we're good. Let me shut the heat off. Let's get rid of the frying setup. Time to put the honey on these Struffoli. Now, I have a lot here. I probably am not gonna be able to do all of them in one bowl, so I'm just gonna take about half. You need to use real honey, 100% honey. I have it here. It's usually clover honey, which is reasonable. I'm gonna pour this over. I don't need it all right now. And I'm gonna stir it in, right? Coat it really well. Let the Struffoli really absorb it. Okay, I'm gonna use it all, right? I always try and give it a little stir before I plate it or before I eat it, because sometimes if it sits for a little while, the honey just sinks to the bottom. Get them coated really well, right? I'm gonna let them sit for a few minutes just to soak up some of that honey, and come back in about 5 minutes to see if they need a little more. There was plenty of honey on here. I don't need to add any more. I'm gonna plate these up. Traditionally, nonpareils or little balls go in here. I don't like to sprinkle them in. I'm just gonna sprinkle them over the top. So make sure that we get all that honey off of the bottom. Let's plate that up. Scrape it all up. Normally we just leave this in the bowl, but I'm gonna plate it up because I fancy. There you go. Okay. A little bit of the nonpareils on top. Make it festive. And there it is. Struffle or Struffoli. All right, it's time to taste. I have my handy dandy Docking Base 7 tasting spoon. Let's get in there. All right. Okay. Now, originally I thought I made them too big, and they are a little too big, but after you put the honey on, they kind of like shrink up. The flavor is totally brings me back to being in my grandmother's house and making these. Is it decadent? Does it have a lot of honey on it? Is it rich? Absolutely. But for the holidays, it's worth it. You should try and make this. Brings back some good memories. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We have merch in the description down below that makes great holiday gifts. We also have a P.O. box down there. I'd like to thank our Patreon patrons for supporting us. Thank you so much. And that's it. That's my Struffoli. I'm Chef Frank. This is Protocooks. Happy holidays.